Da da da! What's my good cheer? Welcome, everybody. Let's give YouTube a couple of minutes, get those notifications out, let people know I've gone live. And in the meantime, if you've never met me before, hi, I'm Cindy. I explore the inside and the outside. And you guys, I was in it today. Boy, was I in it today. Yesterday, I kind of made the decision that I would delve into the topic a little bit. I don't know why it came to me, because I don't normally have a topic of mind when I come into my lives each night. I come in, I let that flow like a breeze pick me up. Sometimes it's like a wind. Sometimes it's nothing. I'm just kind of trying to get some ground and get off the sidewalk a little bit like a leaf, but it is what it is. But last night, I thought maybe we would delve into the topic a little bit about resentment. In all actuality, I was going to put jealousy and resentment together because for myself, it just seemed to kind of go together because I felt good for the fact that I wasn't jealous of what other people had, right? You could go after whatever you want, whatever you achieve in your life. I'll root you on for sure. My sisters, when they do their achieving in their own lives and the things that they want to accomplish, I'm all for it. And I thought, oh my goodness, that's not something I have to deal with. That's something that I've achieved. And I like to come in here and talk about things that I've learned, topics that have come across my path that I find interesting. So I said, okay, well, let's give this a shot. I don't normally come in, I usually let the flow take me. But you know what? It came to mind, and I work with what comes across my path. Let's work on jealousy and resentment. So this morning I got up and well, actually, I started a little bit last night with some notes, but I got up this morning and I knew we were going to be on the topic tonight. Hello, Tammy. Hello, dear. I knew we were going to be on the topic tonight. So I sat down with my cup of coffee. I have another one. And I got right into it. So the first person that I wanted to brush base with, because the person that I first learned about resentment from was a gentleman named Wayne Dryer. I don't know if any of you guys have heard of him before. Super insightful, great thought leader out there. And this one topic he covered so well. I thought he covered it so well. And his idea was, and we're going to just go back to the first page. Oh my goodness. Oh, it was right here. Um, there are no justifiable resentments. There isn't. And I'm so proud of myself. I don't have any resentments to anybody. Like I said, I root people on when they succeed in life. And one of the things that he was talking about was how when you have resentment, it's like getting a snake bite, right? The snake will let go and slither away, but that venom, that poison will stay inside of you and do the work. And I thought that was a really good analogy, because that's what resentment and bad feelings towards each other, that's what that does when you hold that stuff. He attached the word forgiveness in the topic of resentment. And the first thing that came to my mind, because forgiveness was my very first big break when it came to walking into some of these ideas. It was my first revelation that really made an impact in my life. It was the the day that my mother passed away. And my sister, she had no idea she was passing away. The doctors had taken her off all the medication so that she could be coherent in a conversation. And my sister, who was the matriarch of the family, she was supposed to go in there and have a conversation with my mother to find out, the details, of her passing away, let her know that she was passing away and how she wanted to be buried or cremated, or if she wanted to go back to British Columbia and be buried with my dad. And so there were details that need to be taken care of. But my sister freaked out in the last minute and she asked me to do it, to go into the room and have this conversation with my mother. My sister knew very well that mine and my mother's relationship was very strained. It was so strained, and we didn't get along. We didn't really care for each other. There was a lot of hurt and pain and just ugly in that relationship, and it carried on right into our adulthoods or my adulthood. And I had resentment in that, and that's where I'm going to start in this conversation, is in that moment of forgiveness that I had in my last conversations with my mother. She was in the hospital bed, and I didn't know how to open up. She knew that we didn't care for each other, and this wasn't a conversation that somebody who truly cares about you should have with you, right? And that's how I felt about it, but my sister couldn't do it. And it was turmoil. I love my sisters more than anything. So I was thinking of my sisters. And because my mother didn't mean much to me, and that's the truth, my mother didn't mean much to me. That relationship had been totally destroyed like when I was a small child, right? That it was nothing for me to go in and have that conversation. This is the thing that I thought about it, right? And I went up to her side of a bed, and there was a chair there for me, and I sat in the chair, and she was awake and coherent. And I told her, I says, Tracy, it was my sister, asked me to come in and have this conversation with you. Mom, the doctors say that you're dying and there's nothing they can do for you. The cancer has gotten too far, right? If this is hard for you, don't stay in the conversation, right? If this is traumatic for you or triggering you in any way, don't stay in the conversation, or just give me 5 minutes to get through this part and we'll go into the next part. But I said to her, doctor says there's nothing we can do for you. And my mother my mother had cancer for over a year. She didn't say anything to anybody. She didn't go to the doctor. She knew perfectly well that she had cancer. She worked in hospitals all her life. She was spitting up blood into her napkins the day before we got her into the hospital. Uh, it was my birthday, and we went out for a birthday breakfast. The whole family went to get together. That's what we did. One family gathering. Every time somebody had a birthday, that was a reason to get together, right? And I noticed that was blood in her napkin, and she wasn't eating her dinner or breakfast or anything. And I said, Mom, what's wrong? And she goes, nothing, nothing. And I knew she was high. My mother was a compulsive liar, right? Like I knew she was lying about something. There was blood in the napkin, and my sister took her napkin away from her, and she just kind of blubbered her way through the conversation. And that was the end of it. We took her home, and we all dispersed for the day. And the next morning, my sister Alice took it upon herself to go to my mom's apartment, said, get in the car, I'm taking you to the hospital. They took her into the hospital, and it was infested, right? Her whole body. My mother didn't last 10 days, and she was gone. That's how it invested her entire body. But I said to mom, I says, we need to know, like, what do you want us to do? Do you want to be cremated? Do you want to be buried? Do you want to go back to British Columbia and be buried with dad? Right? What do you want? Like, what are your last wishes for us? Right? And for some reason it was just all up in my chest and in my eyes, and whoa, right? And in that moment, I went, oh my goodness, I don't want my mother to go. We haven't healed, right? We haven't healed. And I put my hand on her forehead and I started stroking her forehead, and she was coherent, and she was pretty accepting of the situation and of the conversation. And I rubbed her forehead, and I think in possibility I was more upset than she was. And she told me what she wanted, and I kept rubbing her head, and we had a little conversation, and there was this rush in me, and there was this total forgiveness, not only on my part. I really felt on her part there was forgiveness too. It was so mutual. And in that moment, it was the most beautiful moment I think I ever had with my mother, right? And we have a little Kleenex. It's important. This is important in the conversation, right? And and this rush of forgiveness came into me, and I left that room just knowing she wasn't going to make it through the night, because I actually turned around when I walked out of the room. I walked back into the room because as we were visiting her for the past week, I had brought a big book with me, and I was just using it to, right, we were just keeping company with her, right? She was so drugged up, she wasn't talking or anything, that I just pretended to be in the book. But it was one of my favorite books, and I turned around, and I just knew I was never coming back to this room. So I didn't want to lose the book. And I picked up the book, and I went and had the conversations with my sisters about what my mother wanted. And I didn't tell them about this experience, because this experience of me waking up was fairly new, like very, very new. And it was a process. And a lot of that process was part of me not being there for it, like not understanding what was going on with me, right? And I went home, and then in the middle of the night, my sister called me and said that my mother passed away. I wasn't surprised. I knew it was going to happen that night. I don't know why I knew or how I knew, but I knew, right? Otherwise, I wouldn't have turned around to grab that book, right? And and I got through the funeral and everything, and I didn't cry or anything. They asked me if I wanted to talk. I didn't want to talk about it. I didn't think it was my place, because I didn't really have a relationship with my mother. My sisters adored my mother, just absolutely adored. They were absolutely heartbroken by the situation. So I was their support system during that process. But I understood what Wayne Dyer was saying about resentment, because I held a lot of resentment towards my mother my entire life, right? Because of the experience I had with her emotionally, mentally, and physically. And the lack of any care or attention that was a mother's duty, right? That was a mother's duty. And like I said, that relationship was nothing, right? There was forgiveness there, but there was no I love my mother. There was just disappointment that we only had that one conversation to resolve everything. And the only thing that we could do was to forgive. That was the only thing that we could do to resolve all that. So I understood what Wayne Dyer was saying about forgiveness, because if you don't get rid of that resentment, if that you don't get rid of that pollution out of your body, it festers in you forever. And you're not necessarily doing that forgiveness for somebody else, even though those emotions were there. And maybe they weren't even my emotions, maybe they were my mother's emotions that I was feeling. But it doesn't matter, right? That in that moment, all that resentment that was in me, all that pollution and poison that had been instilled into me, it was just gone when it concerned her. It was a beautiful experience. I have to say, it was a very beautiful experience, right? And, when it comes to resentment, it's about releasing all of that crap, getting it out of your system and everything, right? And, I understood that in this moment, I am here because I made that one decision, that one choice in that moment, because that's what got the ball going, right? Let's call it a snowball up on the top of the mountain, and and the snowball goes down and it just picks up more snow and gets bigger and bigger and bigger. That's what waking up to these ideas was like for me, right? And it was just one tumble after the next. So, I understood that no matter what comes my way, I will not descend to the levels of the lowest again. And that was a promise that I made to myself, that I would never allow myself to have those kind of feelings for anybody. I never had those feelings for anybody else in my life. Never, right? Not a friend, not an enemy, right? It was just that strained relationship that I had with my mom. And I said that I was going to take full responsibility from that point on, that I had forgiven and I had been forgiven. I felt that. And I needed to be forgiven too, because I rejected my mother, right? I took it for as long as I could, and I understood, right? Honor thy mother and thy father. And I did that right up until I was 17 years old, and then there was no taking it anymore. 17 years is a long time to go through the experience that I went through, right? And in that resentment, I probably made her life quite uncomfortable too. But being the good girl that I was, right? And the fact that she said that I was going to give my dad a headache or a headache, a heart attack, if I ever said anything to him. But he knew perfectly well what was going on, right? He knew perfectly well what was going on. But I wasn't going to be the one to be responsible for my dad going down. So that was what I learned last night when it came into resentment, when I started doing a little bit of research about our conversation tonight, right? So this morning I got up and I delved into it a little bit deeper. And of course, I want the smarty pants, right? I want the people who are the experts on these topics. And there's a lady out there, her name is Teal Swan, and she's super smart. She's got like a really, really high IQ. And she speaks through her own experiences too, right? But she's able to do it in a way where it's not full of the humanness, because we are a mishmash of emotions and we carry things like resentment with us and stuff, right? And what she's doing out in the world is trying to get this stuff out of us or to better understand ourselves too, and what we're getting right and what we're getting wrong, right? So she went into a total different aspect of this word, resentment. And she was saying that resentment converts itself to distrust. And I went, what? Distrust? How does distrust come into this conversation? This is the first time I'm hearing about this, right? She says the fear that someone is going to capitalize or consider what is in your best interest, right? Realizing you distrust because you can't rely on someone to take into consideration your best interest. And I went, oh my goodness, this is right. This is me 100%. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, I've got trust issues, which means I do have resentment. I never thought. I thought that was something that I had dealt with my mother passing, but that's not the case to this as we go further. Like, I'll recognize in this moment that I have trust issues, and my resentment is tied into my trust issues, right? Um, Resentment comes from something or someone who has had a negative impact on our well being, on my well being. So we learn to distrust. And I went, oh my goodness, right? Here I am, like a decade into understanding emotions. And just today, I am now recognizing that I have serious trust issues. We'll go into that in a moment. I struggle in resentment because I am stuck in my distrust that always originates from my past experiences. That's my self-protectiveness, that I can't trust people because the people that I was supposed to trust, that I was supposed to be able to trust, were not trustable, right? They weren't looking out for my best interests. They were only looking out for their own best interests. This is part of shadow work. This is part of the work in doing that healing work in our generations, in our own epigenetics, right? And I'm doing this for both sides, right? Because even though my problems were not with my father was an enabler, and he did nothing except to take on the responsibility of making up for what my mother had gotten wrong. He knew what was going, but he didn't have it in him to do that because he was a target too. And not only, well, he was the main target because a lot of what was coming at me was because of my dad's love for his children and because of my codependence on him, because I was so scared of my mother that when my father was home, which wasn't often, that when he was home I was clinging to him, right? For dear life, I was clinging to him. I didn't understand limerence, right? And that's a good part of what was going on. I loved my father, don't get me wrong, I loved my father dearly. But that codependence comes from limerence, right? Because I was looking for him to save me. And even though he wasn't, right, saving me, he was kind of a safe zone because my mother wouldn't pull her stuff around my father because she had an image to uphold within the family and within her very small community that she had, right? Resentment is the unwillingness or the inability to forgive, right? And here I was thinking that I had forgiven, and I truly did forgive what my mother had done, but what my mother had done had not been resolved in my own life because all those problems were there, right? She had programmed me, she had instilled in me all these limiting beliefs that I couldn't trust anybody. There was nobody. My father wasn't coming to save me, right? My sister was my mother's flying monkey, if you want to call that, right? She was the golden child. She was my mother's, I second that. And she was my mother, right? And yet she was still my father too, right? It was that mix, and she was groomed to be something more, right? Maybe she was groomed to wake up to some of these ideas that I woke up to, but it didn't happen that way, right? Resentment is used as a wall to get our unmet needs met. Now, this is Teal Swan's work, right? This isn't like I put insights into this, but this is coming from Teal Swan. She threw me for a loop today, right? And I couldn't have picked a better person to give me these insights because I needed them straight and I needed to spend the afternoon with myself in a lot of contemplation, in a lot of listening to different insights on the topic of resentment. And it was important for me because, right, to have the recognition that hold resentment, that I still hold resentment, right? Because the resentment isn't for all those things because I forgave that, right? But the resentment is that I can't let go and trust people, right? That I can't trust even within my own family, and I can't trust in that movement forward to let go and to be more of those other parts of me, because what if those other parts of me get stuck where they've probably been getting stuck for generations and generations and generations, right? So the resentment is my inability to let go and trust again because, right, I have been betrayed so many times in my life that it's like I'm a bodyguard for those higher parts of me, if you want to call them that, right? Resentment makes us feel like a good person, right? Because of others wronging us. And that's true because I held it against, anything that I held against my mother or held against my sister or held against my father. There was never really an opportunity to vocalize that. When my husband went on a tour, he sent me to go live with my mother for 6 months. Oh, it was awful, but I did it. I did it, right? And I took that opportunity to get some answers, right? To have some of these difficult conversations. I wasn't woke to any of these ideas, but I wanted to know what went wrong with us, right? Why she couldn't connect with me. and why she didn't love me or care for me. And, I really didn't get much in the way of answers. They were pretty frivolous and didn't make much sense. But I held it against her. I really did. It was like a wall that she wasn't allowed to pass by until she made up for the wrongs that she did. And I did the same thing with my sister Tracy, and probably I still do to this moment, those wrongs and those lack of apologies or understandings. But the thing is, I'm not having those conversations with my sister. They have no idea why I have this wall, right? And without them understanding and without those conversation, how fair is it to them, right? They know the walls are there. They just don't understand why the walls are there, right? And they're probably thinking the same thing as what I'm thinking to them. So now they feel that they can't trust me, and I feel I can't trust them. And it's like a merry-go-round. It's that resentment, it's that snake bite, that poison that's in our system that, right, that's just going to fester and take us down, right? When somebody wrongs us, it puts them in a position to make it right with us because we feel they owe us that, which is only a power play in the end, right? It's only a power play in the end. It's holding people's wrongs against them, and that's pretty unrighteous, isn't it? It's a pretty terrible thing to do. That's resentment, 100%. And I have no idea how that never ever came across my path. And I was in it today. I tell you, I was in it today, right? We put ourselves above them, right? um Ensuring that we can move forward, forgiving and associating possibly with them in the future. But we're still not discussing it with them, right? We're just leaving the door open just in case the conversation is had and the possibility that we can fix things. And that's the push and pull, right? That's just unhealthy, and that festers in our system, right? What bad thing would happen if we let resentment go? And I really had to think about that. It was a question that was put towards me, and I went, oh my goodness. If I really truly put resentment away, I would be swapped by somebody who wants my destiny. This is the way, this is the answer that came out of me. And in saying that, I recognize it's self protection. That's what it is. I am being a bodyguard, I am being a gatekeeper to myself, right? Because I can't allow all that work that all parts of us, right? All that hard work to go down the toilet just to have it happen again. The idea is to make sure that for the generations moving forward that we don't do this to our children anymore, that our children are our future, that if we can't fix what's broken, there is no chance for us to move forward at all, not just in my family, right? But in mankind's existence, right? In our evolution, that we are going to become extinct. The whole idea of evolution is that we get better, right? Putting one foot in front of another. And it just doesn't mean in our physicality of our survival, but it means in our mentality. And we know the mentality of the world right now is kind of crazy town, isn't it? Right? Not to talk about individually. And I would hate to think, like I said, all that work just go down the toilet, right? Not to be able to serve anybody moving forward. How heartbreaking is that, right? The resentment is that I am no longer able to trust myself. Trust myself. I can't even trust myself to let go. I can't trust myself to trust others, right? Because that trust has been squashed in every single relationship, and I'm that's not fair to say because right, I do have loving, caring relationships. I am grateful, right? And they didn't have to do this work, but they weren't the victim either, right? They were protected a lot in what was going on in the household because, again, in having some of those conversations, right? Some of my sisters denied that it even happened, even if they were sitting right there when it was happening. And then others recognized that it was in my mother. And then others saying, well, I don't know. I wasn't really paying attention. Right? And that's their prerogative in that. And I can't force anybody to see anything because, I can only be responsible for my own actions, my own thoughts, my own emotions. I can't shove this information down somebody's throat that it's not gonna, right, even resonate with in any way. And at the very end of it, I wrote, I've got work to do. I've got work to do because I have to learn to trust again, right? I have to learn. And I say it all the time, and I believe it when I say everything's going to be okay. Everything's going to be okay. But why can't I say everything is going to be fantastic? This world is going to be beautiful, right? Humans are going to be able to get their poop together and, be good parents and raise healthy children with good mentalities and beautiful emotions, that we are not going to be just becoming frequencies, right? People who don't care, people who move in life with their problems, right? And I talk about those, right? And as highly sensitives, right, we're the ones that take on this work, right? Nobody else is going to take this work on. It's going to be the empaths, it's going to be the caregivers, it's going to be the highly sensitives, it's going to be the INFJs, it's going to be, right? It's going to be us that do that work because we care, right? We don't want to see the world go to pot. We just don't want to. And we're determined and we're servers. So, of course, we're going to try our best. Sometimes we think we're alone in the mess. And that's not true because, oh my goodness, I learned that lesson today if I haven't learned it before. And I knew it before, right? I knew I wasn't in it by myself. But a lot of this work that we do, we have to do it ourselves. It contributes to the pot, right? It's like that story, cabbage soup, right? If you've never, or stone soup, if you've ever heard that story, stone soup, where a traveler comes into the village and the all the houses are shut up and there's nothing going on, and he just builds a fire in the middle of the courtyard with a big pot, and some guy walks by, what are you doing? He goes, I'm making stone soup. And he looks in the pot and there's drops a big stone in the soup and big pot of water. He goes, "Oh my goodness, I like stone soup and you're going to eat that? I'm going to make enough for the whole village," he says. "I'm going to make enough for the whole village." And the guy says, "Well, if you're going to make stone soup, don't you think maybe an onion might make it taste a little bit better?" He says, "I might have an onion at the house," right? And he goes home and he grabs an onion and peels it and he chops it all up and he throws it in the pot, right? With the stone. And by then, other people are walking around looking at what the guy's doing. "Stone soup, what are you doing? Stone soup. Oh my goodness." And he sees the guy throw the onion in. He goes, "Well, I might be able to dig up a couple of carrots if you think that stone soup would taste any better with 2 carrots," right? And they peel and cut the carrots and they throw the carrots. And the next thing you know, all the villagers are bringing a little bit of something, right? They're all starving in their houses, but they all manage to bring a cup of rice or a tomato, the onions and some beans. And the next thing you know, they're having a fiesta. And the village was dark. It was quiet. There was nothing going on. It was dead to the world because they were all festering in their resentment of what they didn't have, right? In their situations and stuff. And the next thing you know, they're all eating the most fabulous stone soup. And somebody brings out their fiddler and they're dancing and partying. And somebody brings out that sneaky keg of beer that they had in the cellar. And they're really having the most magnificent time. But that's what it is. It's all of us contributing a little bit to that stone soup until we have something magnificent, something that we can celebrate in, something that can make a dreary, dark, desperate day sunny and beautiful and worth living in, right? Okay, you guys, let's pull a card. Maybe it'll be relevant to the conversation, right? Maybe it won't. I just wanted to touch that topic. I was inspired last night that we were going to touch on that topic. It was strange because I was going to, right? I was going to cover jealousy and resentment, and I went right into resentment because it just covered everything. Everything. And, we have to recognize that, there are people out there struggling. And when people struggle, when people are scared, when people are worried and frustrated, right? And they're in grief, they sometimes don't want that cheery, right? Sometimes they don't want somebody who's feeling okay because they're not feeling okay. They're aching with illnesses or arthritis. Maybe they just lost somebody. Maybe their husband just left them and it irks people. And I think that's what I did to my mother, right? Because I was so looking for that attention. I was so looking for that love that I was just doing flips and acrobats and whatever I could to make her happy, to make her love me and care for me. And that was extremely irritating for her because she didn't feel that way on the inside, right? It didn't matter what the outside looked. In the inside, she didn't feel that way. And so lots of times they want to bring you down to their level. And if they can, they'll bring you even down lower. And that's something for me to consider, right? When I look at my relationship with my mother, and I know my mother had a difficult life herself. I do know that, right? And so I have to appreciate there's no excuse for abuse. There is no excuse. We have to do better by that, right? But we live in a day and age that nobody can get away with that anymore. And if it was recognized, right? Like it would be recognized in this day and age, I would have been whipped out of that house so fast, make your head spin, make my head spin, right? But I would have lost out in those last years that I would have had with my father before he passed away. I would not have the relationships that I have right now, this minute, that I have with my sisters, whether they're strained or not strained. And the lesson for me is to not be resentful for that, not to put those walls up there, not to force them to do something, right? My dad used to say there's no use in saying sorry if you don't know what you're sorry for, right? And they have to come to that realization themselves, just like I have to come to my own realizations, right? Grateful for the lessons, you guys. Grateful for the lessons. Okay, you guys, let's pick a card, go into it for a few minutes, and then I'm going to go back. I'm done with the topic of resentment for today, but it will be on my mind. Tomorrow's going to be absolutely beautiful. I'm going to go outside. I'm going to go for a walk. I want to take my bike out because it's supposed to be really nice tomorrow, but I don't think that going for a bike ride probably is a good idea in this moment. I'm going to wait until they clean the streets, which will probably be sometime in the next week. They'll be having those summer Zambonis out there sweeping the streets, making everything all nice and clean. I have to keep my windows closed because all my ornaments, and you can see how many ornaments I got, they just get covered. They just get covered in the dust from all the sand that they put out on the roads during the wintertime. Okay, you guys, let's grab a card. I hope everybody is having a great week, right? Sorry if I put anybody in a mood. It's not my intent, right? But I do shadow work here. This is what I do. And I try to do it in baby steps. I try to do it as light as I can, and I do it through my own experiences so that it doesn't feel like it's being forced down anybody's throat as I know better, because today was a prime example that, right, I still got work to do. Okay, you guys. Whoa, that card came out. Enthusiasm. That's a word for the day, especially today. But maybe that's what's needed, right? Enthusiasm is a result of doing what you love. And you guys, it is heavy work, right? It is heavy work. But like I said, it takes the caregivers, it takes the highly sensitives, it takes the empaths, it takes the INFJs, it takes anybody who cares, or anybody who has had those experiences themselves that can drum up that courage to come forward and tell their story and be the example for others, right? You have every right, even as a small man, to have a voice, right? And my voice was squashed as a kid. My I had no voice, and that's probably why I'm so determined to have a voice right now, right? Because these conversations would not have been conversations that I would have been allowed to have, right? Even being a truth teller, I knew better than to say what I wanted to say, because it would be squashed and I would be squashed. So, I am grateful to have my platform so that I can have these kind of conversations, and I hope it does somebody good. Maybe not today, maybe not times, but Google has got this, right? So maybe it'll come across your path and maybe it'll do you some good, right? Like it did me some good. Enthusiasm is a result of doing what you love. And I'll just end my live today saying, I love what I'm doing, right? Because I have the enthusiasm and I have the capability, right? And that was built up, and all aspects of the little tools that go along with that all had to be built up. But I came in with a smile, right? I came in with the smile And I've been on YouTube now for 12 years. Come this December, it'll be 12 years. And I came in with that enthusiasm, and it's still there. It's still there, right? And what I do, it's not fun, but being the evidence for other people that you can come out of it and still have a smile, right? Have a little bit of a giggle, right? That's important. Enthusiasm is a result of doing what you love, right? 100%. You did a good job, Cindy, with your topics tonight, jealousy and resentment. Oh, Tammy, thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate that 100%. I'll come in and take my lesson again for myself to make sure. I'm sure I didn't. I had pages and pages and pages of notes, but I have to throw gratefuls out there for Wayne Dyer, great thought leader, and the best of the best out there. That teal swan, I don't know, she's a smarty pants, and I think she's going to be a great help for us in cleaning up the mess in what we're doing right now, because we all know it's a little bit crazy town, but it doesn't have to stay that way. 100%, I am optimistic in that. Okay, every voice matters and every voice counts. Your channel has a voice, and that's great and important. Okay, Tammy, that's awesome. We'll leave it at that. You guys, that's my good cheer. A little good. That is my good cheer. You guys, that's a little bit for you, right? Grateful if you hung out with me right to the very end, Tammy. Thank you. Thank you so much. Right? And yes, enthusiasm is a very powerful word, right? It is in our optimistic ideas that we are going to survive whatever we need to survive. And it's the fact, right, that we have each other. And I think if I can really dig in a little bit deeper into this idea that I might not be as trusting, well, I know I'm not as trusting as I thought I was, right? But I never really portrayed that I was super trusting. And I do believe that I never said that I was super trusting. But it's all in the work, you guys. And, when I have that experience, and I'm sure it will come across my path until it's through that noggin of me, and this one too, right? That maybe we can make a little bit of movement, right? Okay, you guys, have a great night, and we'll see you tomorrow.